Good evening. Green Greenfield welcomes you to this evening's event. This has been organized and is being co-hosted by Peg Hall, Edie Heineman, Louise Amio, and me, Nancy Hazard, and we want to thank Gabby Perry for tech support tonight. As most of you know, Green Greenfield aims to build a more sustainable future where environmental quality, social equity, and economic vitality thrive. I want to thank you for coming, and to the many of you who have been active to date around the issue of the relicensing of FirstLight's facilities, and for voicing your concerns about the health of our river and the critters that live in it. Many of you have written to FERC, have demonstrated publicly, have written my turns, and more. You've raised everyone's awareness about how our river and everything in it has suffered for 50 years. It's fabulous to see so many of you here on this call. I'd particularly like to thank the legislators and their staff who are active on this issue and here tonight. In addition to our speakers, Representative Blais and Senator Comerford, Representative Oliveira is with us, as is Gabrielle Hansen from Rep. Mark's office, Elena Cohen from Senator Comerford's office, and Julian Mendoza from the Recorder. Thank you for your work and for your support. We're holding this event because the Connecticut River relicensing process is important. It's important because, as you know, issuance of the license to FirstLight would allow for the, my words got covered up, would allow them to continue operating the Northfield Mountain Pump Storage Facility and the Cabot Energy Generating Facilities in Turners Falls for the next 40 to 50 years. This map, which you can see here, gives an overview of where those facilities are located on our river. To date, the licensing process has been frustrating and confusing. It is confusing because there are both federal regulations and intersecting state regulations. There have been closed meetings, and the FirstLight applications for a license is technical and hugely long. I, for one, had given up hope of influencing the outcome, but I'm now optimistic because the relicensing process is moving to a new phase where our voices can be heard. As you know, until now, Influence FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, has appeared to be our only option. We have not felt heard, and it has felt hopeless. We have learned, however, that Section 401 of the Federal Clean Water Act delegates to the state the authority to issue a water quality certificate for FirstLight's projects. The conditions that the state includes in their water quality certificate must be included in the license that FERC issues. I want to say that again. When the state tells FirstLight, you must do this, that, and not the other to get the water quality certificate from the state, the feds, that is FERC, have to include these conditions in the license they issue, and FirstLight has to meet these conditions. This creates our opportunity to act. This law is defined by Section 401 of the Federal Clean Water Act, has been upheld in the Supreme Court 3 times. Peg Hall will now tell you how about all these details.
Good evening. It's important that we understand the details of the process. And something just popped up on my screen covering my script. Okay, now the process to ensure that our voices are heard later about the issues in the river. The process is tonight's focus. There's urgency for us to act now because Massachusetts will have only 12 months to review FirstLight's application and issue the water quality certificate. So now, before that clock starts ticking, we want to be urging Massachusetts to let the public have our say. Here's how it works. It's the responsibility of the Mass DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, to issue the certificate. The Mass DEP is housed in the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, the EEA. The EEA has recently indicated it will hold 2 hearings where we can speak about our concerns and share with them what we want included in the certificate, but they haven't issued any details, and Greening Greenfield isn't convinced this will be sufficient. Therefore, we hope you all will create a tsunami of letters right now to the EEA and DEP, requesting them to hold a robust series of public hearings accessible to all the public who wish to be heard before drafting the Massachusetts Water Quality Certificate. This letter can be short. At this stage, you may, but do not even have to include why the river is important to you or ways you think the application is deficient. The goal at this moment is to make sure that we all have the opportunity to say those things soon and not let First Light's application be the only side of the story the DEP hears. To help you write a letter to the EEA and DEP, we have sample letters, postal addresses, email addresses, and background information with links available on our website at greeninggreenfieldma.org. Gabby's putting our website in the chat, and we'll also email the link to you after tonight's event. Edie Heineman will now introduce our 3 speakers. Edie?
Thank you, Peg. Good evening, everybody. For more information about the relicensing, we've invited 3 people who've been involved in the relicensing process to help us understand these complex details. Massachusetts State Representative Natalie Blais, active in the Connecticut River Legislative Delegation, our own Massachusetts State Senator Joe Comerford, and Andrea Donlin, River Steward for Massachusetts with the Connecticut River Conservancy. They'll each give a brief description of their involvement in the FirstLight relicensing process to date and help us better understand, 1, what might influence the timing of the start of the 12-month clock and the power of the Massachusetts Water Quality Certificate. We've asked them to speak for only a few minutes each. However, they will be staying with us to answer your questions. So please start putting your questions into the chat box. If you're addressing your question to a specific person, please note that person. Natalie, Joe, Andrea, thank you for coming. And Natalie, why don't you start and take it away?
Thank you, Edie. It's a real pleasure to be here with you tonight. And I want to thank everyone for making the time to learn and to be here with one another as we learn about this process and talk about ways to get involved and how we can be most effective in ensuring that your voices are heard. Greening Greenfield, you're incredible for doing this virtual discussion here this evening. I especially want to thank Gabby, Nancy, Peg, Edie, Louise for all of the work that you did leading up to tonight to make this event possible. And thank you for making the ability to participate in the process understandable and easy through providing these links to your website and the follow-up information that you're going to provide. You're right, this is a complicated process with state and federal agencies, and the efforts that you've made to help everyone better understand that process and make it easy for them to participate is really an extraordinary service to everyone. So I just want to thank you for that. Thanks also to the members of the legislative delegation here in the Connecticut River Valley for being such strong partners in this process and for being here this evening. I was sworn into office along with Senator Comerford, and I think Rep. Mindy Dahm is here tonight. She also was sworn in that same year in January of 2019. And one of the very first emails that I received was about the FirstLight relicensing process. It was maybe 2 months after I was sworn in. And I was going through my inbox to see how long this had sort of been on the radar. And it really was from the very beginning of my taking office. And there was rarely a month that went by without some correspondence on this issue. It speaks to the importance of this issue for the region. And I'm so glad to be here with you tonight with my dear friend and colleague, Senator Comerford. We have worked collaboratively together with the Connecticut River Valley delegation, both state and federal, and with so many of you who lifted this issue up very early on in our first months as legislators. We've been actively involved in this process, bringing the state agencies involved. And as you noted, there are many of them, and stakeholders together to identify and address concerns, working hard to be sure that your voices are heard, raising awareness about how you can be involved in the process. And one of the areas that we've really doubled down on, and you've raised it here tonight, is the necessity of a robust public participation process. As you talked about this evening, the state has the authority through the 401 Clean Water Certificate to significantly improve aquatic habitat, enact safe, effective, and timely fish passage for migratory fish, to reduce the erosive loss of valuable riparian property, and to restore and protect the federally designated uses of swimming and boating, to transform the design, operation, and impacts of this proposed relicensing project. We talked about the application being filed and triggering a one-year schedule for the state to evaluate the license and craft a set of operating conditions as well as mitigation requirements that must be adopted by FERC. This is our power. This is our time to make our voices heard about what is important to this region, because anything the state requires in the certificate will automatically be included in the final FERC license. These public comments submitted to the state during this process that you talked about are important. They're necessary because they can have a positive impact on the long-term benefits of this beautiful river that so many of us call our backyard, and we're lucky to do so. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about, I want to just talk a little bit about a letter that the legislative delegation wrote in August of 2021, where we addressed a letter to the governor, EEA, and DEP, recognizing the state's authority in Section 401 to condition the operating license that could be issued by FERC, as well as the state's own water quality standards. And we requested very specifically the strongest set of operating conditions, mitigation obligations, investment in public recreation, and protections for the cultural, historic, and archaeological resources. These have been on our radar because you have lifted them up, and we have heard from you, and it's important for us to work with you to continue to make sure that your voices are heard throughout this process. And we're committed to being here with you tonight to talk more about how we can lift voices up, not only here at the state level, but also at the federal level. As you noted, this is a generational project, and we need to make sure that we're doing this in the right way. And I want to make sure that I give time to my dear friend and colleague. I think I'm supposed to be turning it over to Senator Comerford. Yes. My dear friend and colleague, Senator Comerford, who has been incredible to serve with together, and to take it from here. Senator Comerford.
Representative Blais, it is good to see you. Hello, everybody. Natalie, thank you so much for all you've done. I love serving with you. I love serving with our colleagues. And like you, oh my goodness, I love green and greenfield. You know, Nancy, at the top of your remarks, you beautifully talked about the power of the advocacy that this region brings to bear on critical issues like this relicensing project. And you know, 3 years into my service in the state Senate, it is so clear to me that government works only when people make it work. And it is an honor to join forces with you and of course, folks like Rep. Blais and our whole Connecticut River delegation in channeling your interests into this process. And I'm so grateful for your expertise and the kind of passion you bring to this. And actually, I took a screenshot of the diagram that you put up about this very complicated process, so that Elena and I, District Director Elena Cohen, who's here and for whom I'm very grateful, Elena and I can use it in our own advocacy with constituents who want to participate effectively. And I would say that, yes, absolutely, you should make your views known to EEA and DEP folks and to your delegation, the senators and representatives who are both here tonight and who represent this region, because when we hear from you, we prioritize this work and we can channel what you're telling us into our efforts. So as Rep. Blais said beautifully, we are working very closely as a delegation, and we understand that this is a river and a resource that affects all of our communities, our environment, our economies, our history. It is central, intrinsic to the way of life in Western Massachusetts. And this is a generational decision. And so what transpires has to be so carefully thought through, and all the stakeholders have to be seen and engaged with. As Rep. Blais said, we are working closely with the Connecticut River Conservancy and the Franklin Regional Council of Governments, and now Greening Greenfield, the municipalities and the recreation advocates in our districts to understand the concerns and priorities. And we've also, as Rep. Blais said, been engaged with EEA. We've met as a delegation with EEA 4 times since December 2020. And EEA has agreed at our request to meet with us monthly during the 1 year that the state has in this 401 water quality certificate process. And thanks to your input, we've cataloged the issues that advocates and municipalities have raised and shared them with EEA. We call it a shared concerns document, to make sure that EEA has heard the same advocacy that we have, that you have brought to us. And these are issues, again, that can be addressed through the water quality certificate, which is why advocacy at the state level right now is so critical. I won't repeat them verbatim because Rep. Blais categorized them and summarized them so well, but it's everything from concerns about fish passage to advocacy for ecologically based river flows but below the Turner's Fall Dam, to advocacy for independent analyses and study that FirstLight conducted on their impact on erosion. So, we're advocating for independent eyes on some of these assumptions. Issues, of course, of recreational access and protection of the significant historical and archaeological resources, especially in the Montague and Great Falls area. And concerns, very pragmatic concerns about tax revenue for towns, so that as we ask for greater ecological and recreational protections, our communities don't suffer an economic hit, which, again, I think we all will join together in unison in rejecting that premise. We've supported EEA's work to broaden the number of outside experts and engage with more of the EEA universe, including, for example, DCR and Fish and Wildlife, and MDAR, the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture Resources, so that we can work with them in seeing the whole universe of the impact on the decisions that lay ahead. As Natalie said beautifully, we have advocated strongly for the need for public meetings, and EEA has told us that they see the importance of these and they're going to be scheduling them. I hear tonight from you that 2 is not enough. And, I'll join with Rep. Blais and my colleagues in bringing that strong message from you back to EEA as you bring it to them directly, and we'll ask for more robust opportunities for the public. And again, these need to begin and we need to have notice of them, and they have to be well facilitated and have ample opportunity and time for people to weigh in. I'm going to stop there because I know we want a robust time for questions and answers. And so I want to be here with you through all of it. For now, I'm going to pass it to Andrea Donlin from the Connecticut River Conservancy, with my thanks for all that she has done to make us smarter on this issue. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Senator Comerford. My name is Andrea Donlin. I'm a river steward with the Connecticut River Conservancy, and I've been in this position for 18 years. And we've been participating as a stakeholder organization in the relicensing since it started in 2013. We also, as an organization, did participate in the relicensing of Holyoke Dam, and then upstream 15 Mile Falls, which is in northern Vermont, New Hampshire. And we're also, this Turner's Falls Dam in Northfield Mountain is being relicensed at the same time as 3 dams in New Hampshire, Vermont, owned by Great River Hydro: Vernon Dam, Bellows Falls, and the Wilder Dam. I've also been participating in the Bear Swamp and Fife Brook Dam relicensing on the Deerfield River, which is ongoing. And I regularly comment on low impact hydropower institute certification for dams, and participate in a hydropower reform coalition group with other groups around the country. And we can, sort of network about different relicensing issues and hydropower issues. Because these hydropower grant licenses last for 50 years, we've been working really hard and has made it a priority for our organization to try to get the best deal for the river. And we've gotten a bunch of grants and hired different consultants to help us along the way, fish biologists, economic consultants, lawyers, and that sort of thing. And so it's been a long road. It's been frustrating, confusing, very interesting. And we are at a point where we're getting to the point where fairly, within the next year, the 401 water quality certificate application will go into the state. And so I'll talk a little bit about what that is and the process. And I think it's great that the state has already said they're going to have hearings. It's interesting because the state does not get a whole lot of hydropower license 401 applications over time. There aren't a ton of hydropower dams in Massachusetts, and they're mostly out here. And so, just for example, when Bear Swamp and Fife Brook Dam went up for the 401, there was a 20-day comment period. There were no hearings. There was one maybe notification in the paper in the legal section, and if you caught it, you might have 10 more days of the comment period. So their process has not been that easy to weigh in on, and it's a pretty big deal. Like, it's very complicated, and there's been tons of studies, and 20 days just doesn't cut it for a comment period of this significance. So I think it's great to try to engage with the state to make a more robust public process. 401, it refers to the section of the Clean Water Act that this permit comes from. And basically, the state of Massachusetts is able to, or has the right to issue a permit that will affect the water quality of the state. And this permit gets incorporated into the FERC license. So the FERC process has its own set of regulations and a very confusing timeline. And then the state permit is 1 year's worth in there, and it kind of fits in and becomes a section of the FERC license in a way. So both areas are sort of leverage points for, if you care about the outcome, you can comment to FERC and you can comment to the state. And they have, slightly different, but some overlapping areas of jurisdiction. So under the Clean Water Act, each state has a set of surface water quality standards. And states are obligated to try to protect the uses of surface waters. And so uses can be aquatic life like fish. It can be recreation uses. It can be irrigation. It can be drinking water. There's a lot of different types of uses of water, and states are not supposed to let the water quality go backwards, backtracking. So oftentimes, that's why it's so hard to, it would be very difficult to permit Northfield Mountain or even Turner's Falls Dam today, because it would be impossible not to have that be backsliding on water quality. So the segments of water above the dam and below the dam, the Turner's Falls Dam, are considered impaired by DEP. Upstream, it's impaired for flow regime modification, no surprise given the fluctuations, and alteration in stream side vegetation. Those are also from the hydropower peaking. Downstream of the dam, it's that section of river between the dam and the Deerfield River, which is also called the bypass channel, which is the actual river channel, but most of the water is being diverted through the power canal. That is impaired for dewatering, as people who drive over the bridge between Turner's Falls and Greenfield have seen how bony it is most of the year. And then also it's impaired for flow regime modification. So the state really is obligated to attempt to improve the conditions and have those segments meet water quality standards. So this is what, when there's a comment period, comments could be about how these facilities should operate that would meet the water quality standards of the state. This comment period, we don't know exactly when it will be opened. It is tied to the FERC process. So FERC will eventually issue what's called a ready for environmental analysis, and that's when they start to do their own draft environmental impact report. So when FERC issues that, the company will file applications to the state, and that will start the 1-year clock, and the state is obligated to issue a 401 certification or deny the permit. And we only get one chance to comment in the beginning, and then the state makes their determination. Once the 401 is issued or denied, people or the company can appeal that, and then you go through a whole lot of process in courts or out of courts. And for example, Bear Swamp was denied a 401, and the company appealed that. And for the last year and a half, the company and the state agencies, and then Trout Unlimited actually are parties to trying to settle that disagreement. And actually a settlement agreement came out today on that. So that's kind of interesting. Didn't have time to fully read it, but this is kind of the example of how the process can go on a lot longer than you really want it to, because there's always opportunities to appeal and that sort of thing. So I think I will start doing the Q&A. I know there are a bunch of questions in the chat, and I don't know, Green and Greenfield folks, did you want to moderate that or ask your own questions before we get to the chat questions?
This is Louise. I want to thank all three of you for your wonderful presentations. It's clear from your remarks that you have been closely watching the developments around the FirstLight relicensing process, and that you are more than ready to support our continued efforts. At this time, we'd like to reiterate for our guests the importance of contacting the EEA and the DEP to request robust public hearings. As we noted earlier, now is the time to ensure that we have input into the water quality certificate. Please go to our website as shown on this slide for the details on how to proceed and send your letters as soon as possible. Remember, before we can expect to be heard, we have to guarantee that we have the opportunity to speak. In other words, before all else, we have to get the hearings. And now Gabby has a short poll.
Thank you, Louise. I'll be posting a quick poll asking a short question to you all. So you should be able to see that on your screen now for the next few seconds. If you're unable to see it, please let me know. Like we're at about 50% of us have responded. So if you give it a few more seconds to give you all a little bit more time. Okay, we're slowing down, so I'm gonna end it there and post up our results as well, so you all can see. So asking if we feel like we have enough information to write the EEA right now. We have a bit of a range of responses here that you all should be able to see on your screen, with about 37% is yes, 37% is almost a maybe. Looks like we have the information, so this is great. And I'll pass it back to you, Louise.
Thank you, Gabby, and everyone. Now we'll move on to the Q&A. If you have not already done so, please put your questions into the chat. And if your question is directed to a particular person, please be sure to make note of that. Peg and Nancy will be reading the questions from the chat box. We will take questions about the relicensing process first. And if you have questions about content, such as about erosion issues or fish, please hold those questions until we have finished with the process questions. We'll be staying online until probably as late as 8 o'clock. Peg, can we have the first question, please?
Okay, I'm rather than trying to take these exactly in order, I'm going to start with something that's sort of a combination. I can tell from several of the questions that there's still some confusion about the order of when is public input, when is the state process, how does that fit into the federal process, into the FERC? And you know, like there's one question about, has CRC told us about the hearings? The hearings haven't happened yet. There's another question about if the state gets to overturn the FERC, but I think we want to spell out that the state happens before FERC issues a license. So Andrea, do you think maybe you could run down just a quick when, and maybe Gabby, could you put that slide back up about the, let's see, I think it's slide 3. Is that the one about the water quality certificate process? And then if Andrea, you can sort of say how that fits into the FERC part of the process. We don't need to go over the last 12 years, but you could sort of start us kind of where we've been this last year and work our way up through what's going to happen next.
Sure. So FirstLight submitted a final license application last December, and FERC then wrote several like additional information requests. FirstLight responded to that, and then we've all just been waiting for FERC to say whether they're ready for the environmental analysis or not. In the meantime, a couple of the chat people have mentioned this, but there have been negotiations to try to come to a settlement. So for FirstLight and some of those participants wrote to FERC and requested a delay in issuing their ready for environmental analysis. And FERC has never responded to that, but so far they have not issued their ready for environmental analysis. So whenever FERC either decides they want to proceed, or if the settlement is filed with FERC, at some point FERC will say, okay, we're ready to proceed with our environmental analysis. That point, there is a FERC comment period where people can write anything they want about what they recommend should happen with the new license, denied, accepted with certain stipulations and that kind of thing. At the same time, the company will file a 401 application. And if there is a settlement agreement, the settlement agreement will be part of that package that goes to DEP. DEP then has a year to issue the permit. And the comment period is at the front end of that 1 year process. So it's like, you know, I said it was 20 days in, but I don't know what they'll decide to do for this one. I think 20 days is not long enough for people to get all their comments together. Does that help?
So what you're saying is it will go to the state to have the hearings and then for them to issue the water quality certificate with conditions. And that's a whole year process.
Yes.
And that's what we're trying to get in the beginning of that process. And then that information from the state goes to both FirstLight and the FERC. And it's only after that's all up at the FERC that the FERC would actually issue any license if they're going to. Is that correct?
Right. FERC, while the 401 process is going on, FERC is doing their environmental impact report. There's a draft version. You can comment on the draft. Then it gets finalized. And then they wait for the 401. And I think after that, once you have a 401 and the final EIR, it gets packaged and there's a final license that is issued by FERC. So we're, you know, a couple of years still away from that, I believe.
Wow. Thank you, Andrea and Peg. Nancy, do you have a question for us, please?
Yeah, I've been looking at all these things in the chats. I have to say it's a bit overwhelming. And most of them seem to be sort of content-oriented questions, and I'm trying to focus on the process. There is one here that I'm not sure if it fits logically, but it's like if this all moves forward through the process, what rules are in place during the appeal? Like if, you know, you get to that point where there's an appeal, what happens next? That's way down the pike, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's appeal of the 401, and I think there can probably be an appeal of FERC, and I'm not really sure what happens with that. That becomes a federal process. As anybody knows, when lawyers get involved and appealing happens, these things can get drawn out for years. And so there are a number of different outcomes that can happen. But sometimes what happens is that the parties have to come together and bang out an agreement. And so whether you have a settlement agreement happening now or an attempt to happen now, or whether it's going to be 5 years from now, that's usually often how that gets resolved.
Thank you.
Peg, back
Joe,
to you.
Natalie, do you want to add anything, Joe or Natalie? No? All right. Thank you.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. To this process, this last process question about what happens like down the road, I think Andrea covered it really well. In fact, and I would actually not hazard to be an expert about that part of the process. I'm like Rep. Blay and our colleagues, I'm really laser focused on how we make sure that the state, both EEA and all of its agencies. And also, we didn't talk about this, Ripley and I didn't, but also our colleagues in the Senate and House with relevant intersections like the Telecommunication and Utility and Energy Committee, right? We're making sure that they understand essentially the fight that's happening here, right? The interest of our constituents so that they understand what we're looking for on the part of this process, because they'll have intersections down the road, legislation, budget, things like that, and they should understand what our stakes are out here in Western Mass for the river.
It's a great point, Joe, that as state legislators, we are focused in on how we can be most impactful at the state level. And to Joe's point, making sure that the chair people of these committees understand what our constituents are talking about. I emailed, somebody mentioned earlier, the letters that have been printed in the local newspapers. I took the liberty of copying and sending along those letters directly to the chairperson of the TUE committee so that they could hear directly from our region about what is top of mind for you. So I just want to echo Joe's thoughts in trying to lift up your voices in that way at the state level.
Absolutely. And I didn't do that smart thing, Natalie, although I should. But I did take, for example, our shared concerns doc, the letter that we wrote to EEA to kick off this work. And I made sure that the Senate chair of TUE had those. And I'll follow it up with the letters because that's a good idea.
I'll forward you the links so you have them all and you don't have to do the work. We could also, I mean, the resources that you all have put together on the Greening Greenfield website would be a wonderful thing to send their way and to their staffers. So I'll make sure to follow up on that too.
That's a great idea. We can do it together maybe with the delegate.
That would be great.
I think that's a great lead into the next question. You're talking about all the different agencies that are involved. And the first question we had from Don is, hasn't DEP already been meeting with FirstLight in private? And I'm going to expand on that a bit to say, we've heard about these things being referred to as secret meetings. And it's my understanding that the settlement talks were a way to see if the license application could be improved before the formal review process begins with that 12-month clock ticking. And that any interested participant any interested party could have participated if they were willing to sign a non-disclosure agreement. So is that right? And who's in that room and who's not in that room right now?
I'll start, you guys, and then Andrea and Natalie, you make it better. So first, to the first good question, Peg, about whether or not DEP has been meeting with FirstLight. Boy, I hope they have. I hope everybody in the EEA world is meeting with FirstLight to make clear the state's interest and in the process, and to build human relationships that are going to be really, really necessary. That's one of the things that the state delegation at the state level, again, has been wanting EEA to do, is to make robust outreach with FirstLight and make sure the paths of communication are very open. Because again, we'll have these 365 days when the clock starts, and we can have no room for just getting the wheels started. We need there to be a mechanism for engagement here. And so, so we've also, again, your delegation, the people who work for you, like Natalie and I and Mindy and Jake, who are here tonight, we've been meeting with EEA, conveying, again, our concerns, the concerns that you brought us, and doing all the things that Natalie and I described, right? Hey, can you get all of your agencies in to make sure that they're all looking at this? Hey, we're supporting you and thinking about and doing and getting outside expertise to make sure that it's, we don't have just a crushed state agency, that we have experts looking at this. Hey, are you talking to the constituents who are talking to us? And we'll name organizations. Are you talking to those people or these people? So to make sure, again, that there's just a wide open channel. My understanding, and again, Replay and Andrea will make this better, is that there is a group of people, or there has been, I don't actually even know if it's continued. Actually, let me back up. the other thing the delegation has said, and this has been really clear, is that, we care about the environment, that's the health of the river and the species in the river. Don Ogden wanted me to make sure that I was also caring about non-humans. I am, Don. We care about the health of the river. We care about access, equitable access, right? Breaking down barriers. We care about the farmers who take water from the river. We care about the towns and erosion. We care about the towns and the tax base, all of that. We care about the Native American cultural heritage sites. All of that has to be on the table. And you'll see if you look at that letter, that we enumerate briefly some of those concerns, right? This was our foray into EEA. And I will say that Secretary Theo Herides has been quite a good partner here, as is, a couple of the folks with whom she's working. I see this as a giant universe, right? And we have all these different subsections of concerns. And because we represent a diverse constituency, you care about different pieces of that. Some of you want us to care about the economic well-being of the town. Some of you want us to care about recreation, the health of the river, right? All of this. And so we, on your behalf, care about it. That's our job, right? Our job, because we work for you, we care about this. My understanding is that there has been a meeting. I did not participate. I know for a fact that Rep. Blay did not participate in conversations with recreation advocates and FirstLight. Remember, recreation is one part of this overall universe of concern. I don't know where that is actually in its trajectory. I don't, maybe Andrea or Rep. Blay knows, but they have had conversations. And my understanding is that part of the reason that they were having those conversations is so that those conversations would take place, and they take time, right? They would take place outside of the process so that the process would not feel as crushed, so that they could have these intensive conversations, which required municipalities to weigh in and all these things. So that is what I understand. And again, I did not participate, and neither did Rep. Blay. I don't think anybody from the delegation did, although I shouldn't be quoted there because I don't know that for a fact. So I hope that answered some of what you were asking, Peg.
Yeah, so Andrea, can you clarify? So who is in the room? Which DEP, EEA, which of those pieces, what towns, what nonprofits? Is there a quick list you can give us? Because I know we're already running out of time.
Yeah, I'll explain who's involved, and then I kind of want to give a little background of like why attempt to settle, because there's been some comments about that. And so the federal agencies that are involved are the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the NOAA, National Marine Fisheries Service. They cover the migratory fish and the federally endangered species. The state agencies are DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation for the recreation stuff, Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, and then Department of Environmental Protection, DEP. But DEP has been pretty clear about wanting to stay fairly outside of it because they do not want the 401 to be already prescribed. So they're really the least involved. And then the different other stakeholder groups, Nature Conservancy, CRC, Appalachian Mountain Club, American Whitewater. There's a Nordic skiing group interested in the skiing at Northfield Mountain, NEMBA, the Mountain Biking Association. There's a Climbers Coalition. It's, Northfield Mountain and Turner's Falls, they do offer a lot of different recreation opportunities that are important to the region, and all those constituents have been involved in discussing what the potential terms would be. It is true that individuals or interested parties the other thing, the people I mentioned, left out were also the towns some of the towns have been involved as well. I guess the reason for attempting to have a settlement agreement would be that parties would hope that through intense discussions of interests and negotiations, the outcome would be better for the party participating than filing things and have all the decisions with FERC or even the DEP. And so that would be the reason that you'd hope that through a discussion of values and, you know, arguing and that sort of thing, that parties would come to an agreement and get a decent deal. And that's always the hope. They could fall apart at any time. You could participate to a certain point and realize this isn't getting what I wanted and bail out. And so there's never a guarantee until the thing is, you know, inked. So we'll see what happens. I can't
Okay,
say anything more than that because I have been involved in the negotiations, and that's part of the non-disclosure. Part of the reason for having it be private is not to leave people out who are interested in being part of it, but that because there's a give and a take, you know, it just, you want to not have people going to the press during mid-negotiation.
Okay, I have a question here. I'm going to try to slip in. We're getting close to the end. Can you help us, Andrea, I guess mostly how to translate our concerns into a condition, something that the DEP would consider? And I personally have been thinking about, you know, could one of the conditions be as huge as saying that FirstLight can't use the Connecticut River as its lower reservoir for their Northfield pump water system? I mean, obviously, if they couldn't use the river, well, that would change everything. And then it would be the FirstLight's onus to figure out what they're going to do about it, rather than us trying to suggest a solution to the problem that we see of the erosion and the fish and all that other stuff. So I guess the question is could we say something like that? And do you think the DEP could hear that and would actually consider it seriously?
Well, we filed numerous requests through FERC that be a study that's done, that a lower reservoir or even a full analysis of alternative ways of operating or mitigating the impacts of Northfield Mountain. FERC rejected that. The company said also that it would be akin to being asked to engineer an entirely new facility. And so we haven't gotten any traction through the public process of that. Whether DEP would require that, I don't know. Clearly, the river section is considered impaired. But even if you took Northfield out, would it be restored? The dam's still going to be there, so you'd have to take both of the thing out to fully restore the river. So it would be a very big economic impact. And actually, people have said something about Northfield Mountain was installed as a companion to nuclear power. And that is the case. I think the nuclear power plants, when they're on, and they don't shut down for the night or anything. So there's excess power to sort of buy off the grid at a cheap price during the middle of the night in order to pump the water uphill. And since nuclear plants, at least Vernon, shut down, that has gone away, and Northfield Mountain has mainly been, I think, buying power off the grid from natural gas plants. So CRC has been, trying to understand what's the future role in the next 50 years of Northfield Mountain, if it was to continue, and will it continue? It's basically a giant battery. And up until now, up until like 2 or 3 years ago, it was really the only kind of battery. Pump storage was really the only kind of battery on the grid. Now there are, big facilities of sort of lithium-ion batteries and different things like that. Those things are getting on the grid now. They're much smaller than pump storage, and they also, involve mining for metals in other countries, and that are also have an environmental impact. So, what I've come to understand is that I think as we're transitioning to more renewable power on the grid, pump storage does have a role of being a battery. At some point in the future, I don't know when, maybe 15, 20 years, maybe there will be enough other kinds of batteries or other types of renewable energy, and that kind of storage won't be as competitive or economical. And at that point, maybe it would be, if it's not having the kind of role it has on the grid today, that would be time to retire it. I mean, it is having a huge effect on the river, though. That is it's not a good thing for the river at all. So that's the kind of
Thank you.
the trade-off.
And Nancy, as a result of your great work and others, I know Senator Comerford and I have both raised the point of a closed loop system and whether or not that might be something that is feasible. So I just wanted to point to your strong advocacy on that potential suggestion that we've raised at the state level.
Absolutely. And the other thing that we've raised is with the secretary and her team is really needing an answer as to the efficacy of FirstLight's battery storage and the role in greening the grid, right? We need to understand what the alternatives are out there, what this transition to 100% renewable energy looks like in Massachusetts. And I would venture to say that the folks on this call are in the 100% renewable camp, right? We don't want to settle for net zero. It's too much of an incremental move given the climate crisis that we're facing. And so we've asked, so what role is FirstLight playing in the pump storage facility and the battery storage? That's a conversation we're going to continue to push on so that we get an answer to really understand the leverage points we might have now and going forward. I'm just looking at the clock, so there's a longer conversation to have here, but I want to be mindful of everybody's time.
Right, and outside of relicensing, there are bills that come up before the state legislature, and FirstLight is a company that's been advocating for this, like having a contract for pump storage hydro, and that's something we would not be in favor of at all, because it seems like it would sort of lock in the profits, even if the markets wouldn't support the company making that kind of profit.
All right, I think we've passed our time for the last question. I'm gonna really quick just answer 3 of them. So I know Janet Sinclair has had to leave early, but she asked, would the water quality certificate, clean water certificate really matter much? In other words, short of shutting it down, do protective measures, what it is called conditions, matter? And the answer is yes, that is the state's power. Another question said, can FERC overrule the state? No, it can't. That's the state's power. And one other person asked, why isn't Carl Meyer here? We invited him 3 times. We couldn't get him to come. I'm sorry also. Louise.
Yes. Wow, that was really powerful, everyone. Thank you so much. In closing, we'd like to thank our speakers. Unfortunately, it's 8 o'clock. I think we could go on for another hour, but we're committed to closing now. We'd like to thank all of our speakers as well as our legislative delegation for working on the relicensing process to protect our river and our environment. We are lucky to have you working with us. I'd like to thank Gabby Perry for her excellent tech support, and a big thank you to everyone who joined us tonight for your activism to save the river and for your questions. If we didn't get to your question, please go to our website where you get more detailed information about the letters that you are being asked to write, and also more information about the issues around the letter. If you can send your letters in the next 2 days, that would be terrific. Please remember that it's important that the DEP hold robust public hearings, because this is our unique opportunity to share our concerns and influence the outcome of the relicensing of the pump storage and Cabot generating systems and their impact on the level of the river. As busy as you may be, please do not let this chance pass you by. Watch for an email that will include links to help you write your letter and a brief evaluation form. We'd really appreciate your prompt response. Thanks again to our wonderful speakers and to all who came here tonight. Peace and wellness to all. In closing, Nancy will share a river song with us.
So this song that's about to start is Claire Darcy wrote this song for the Connecticut River Conservancy Song Contest in 2011, and it reflects our love for the river, and let's all work together and protect it. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andrea, Joe, Natalie, thank you.
It's raining again, fat drops roll down the pane, river's up for the second time this spring. And if it rains anymore, won't be long before she spreads her silver skirts across these fields. This traveling life of mine has taken me up and down the line of the highway, follows the river's flow, and I've left pieces of my dreams from Springfield to Fairleigh, where the river stretched like a shining thread between. This river gives and she takes away, like she's done for 30 million years, or so they say, from the slopes of Old Mount Tom to the fields of Hadley Court. This river made my home. She picks up pieces of where she's been, beauty and the sin, and she rolls on from the mountains to the sea. Flakes of schist from the greens, bits of granite from White Mountain streams. She lays them at her feet here in the valley. And when my traveling is done and tired, I wander home to this old mill town here in the valley. In the cradle of the old oxbow, listen to her flow, tell the stories of the towns I leave behind me. This river gives and she takes away, like she's done for 30 million years, or so they say, from the rushing of great falls to the This river made my home. From the floodplains where I walk to the migratory floods, this river made my home. This river